The story you're about to hear is a wonderful tale of revenge and romance. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the story and comment on where you're watching this video. Thank you for watching. Either you walk away now, or I put you in a coma. That's what the MMA fighter said as he cracked his knuckles in the parking lot behind Murphy's pub, the same fighter my wife had been seeing for the last 3 months. I looked at him standing there, chest puffed out, muscles bulging under his tight shirt, like he was about to step into the octagon. Sweat glistened on his forehead under the yellow glow of the lamppost, and the smell of alcohol and testosterone hung in the humid night air. Then I looked at Jessica, standing beside him, arms crossed, expecting me to back down like some scared husband. She was wearing that vanilla perfume I'd bought her for our last wedding anniversary before everything fell apart. My name is Cole Bishop. I'm 38 years old, and I spent 14 years in special operations before coming home. Today I work in construction, building houses instead of neutralizing threats in places most people can't even pronounce. But some habits never die, like reading a room, like knowing when someone is all posturing and nothing more, like identifying a man's weak points in under 5 seconds. She's finally with someone strong, Brad continued, stepping closer. His breath smelled like whey protein and cheap beer. Someone who can actually protect her. I noticed how his right hand trembled slightly, adrenaline mixed with nerves. He had warrior tattooed on his forearm in Gothic letters, the kind of tattoo you get at 18 and regret by 30. I gave him a slight smile. Fighting in a cage is one thing. 14 years of neutralizing threats overseas taught me 53 ways to end a fight without breaking a sweat. He laughed, but I saw his eyes falter. I saw the pupil dilation, the primitive fight-or-flight instinct starting to fire in his reptilian brain, the doubt creeping in. "You think your little army stories scare me," he said, but his voice had already lost some of its arrogance. The pitch went up half a step, betraying his uncertainty. I started unbuttoning my cuffs, rolling up my sleeves slowly, deliberately, like I was preparing for a job I'd done 1,000 times before. Not because I planned to fight him, but because I wanted him to see the scars. The shrapnel wounds from Kandahar, where an IED almost sent me home in a box. The chemical burn marks from a fire in Somalia that still ached when the weather changed. The knife slash from a close encounter in Syria that should have killed me but didn't because I was faster, smarter, more prepared. Each mark told a story of survival in places where death was common currency. Brad's posture shifted. His shoulders dropped just a fraction. His weight moved from his front foot to his back, his body unconsciously preparing to retreat. "Cole, stop it," Jessica said, her voice sharper now, but I caught the tremor underneath the bravado. "You're making a scene." There was something else in her eyes, maybe regret, maybe fear that I would tell him what she had done 3 weeks ago. When she came to our apartment at 2 in the morning, crying, saying she'd made a mistake, I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I married 6 years ago in a small ceremony at St. Benedict's Church, the woman who used to trace these same scars with her fingertips and tell me she was proud of what I sacrificed for our country. The woman who would wake up screaming when I had nightmares about Fallujah and hold me until I stopped shaking. Now she was standing next to a guy who thought flexing his biceps made him dangerous. "I'm not doing anything," I said in a low, controlled voice, the same voice I used to give orders under fire. "Just showing your boyfriend what a real fight looks like." Brad took a step back, then another. The gravel crunched under his expensive sneakers, the $300 models that promised to improve his athletic performance. "This isn't over," he said, trying to salvage some dignity. But we all knew it was. The moment he flinched, the moment he showed weakness, the alpha he pretended to be died right there in that poorly lit parking lot. I walked to my truck, a 2018 Ford Ranger I'd bought with my military severance pay, started the engine that rumbled like a waking animal, and drove away. But as I pulled out of the lot, I saw in my rearview mirror Brad lean in and whisper something to Jessica, something that made her nod and smile, something that told me this wasn't about my wife anymore. This was about a man who thought he could intimidate a veteran and get away with it. He had no idea what he had just started. He had no idea that I had spent years learning how to destroy men not with force, but with information, patience, and surgical precision. I drove through the empty streets, past the mirrored downtown buildings that reflected the city lights like fragments of a broken mirror. The radio was playing some sad country song about lost love, and I turned it off, preferring the silence. My mind was already mapping out the next moves, like a chess game where I could see 10 plays ahead, and my opponent could barely see one. Jessica and I met at a coffee shop near the base when I was still on active duty. The Daily Grind, a small place that served the best donuts in town. She was finishing nursing school at the State University, working double shifts at the university hospital to pay for her tuition. Her eyes had dark circles from exhaustion, but she smiled at every customer like they were the best part of her day. I was between deployments, trying to figure out how to be normal for 3 weeks before going back to the Afghan desert, where the temperature hit 113 degrees and death lurked around every corner. She made me laugh with her stories about eccentric patients, made me forget the things I'd seen, the faces of the men I'd killed in the name of my country. She made me believe I could build something good when I finally came home for good. Our first real conversation happened when she spilled coffee on my uniform. She was rushing between tables, balancing 3 mugs, when she tripped over a backpack left in the aisle. Hot coffee splashed all over my camouflage fatigues, and her face turned crimson with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she said, frantically grabbing napkins. "I'll pay for the cleaning, I swear." I just laughed, something I hadn't done in months. "I've had worse things stain this uniform," I said. "At least coffee smells good." She stopped, looked me in the eyes for the first time. There was something there, an instant connection neither of us expected. "You're military?" she asked. "Special Forces," I replied, waiting for the usual reaction of awe or fear. But she just nodded, as if that explained something she was trying to understand. "My dad was a paratrooper, died in the line of duty when I was 12. Suddenly the spilled coffee didn't matter anymore. We got married 2 years later, on a Saturday afternoon under a clear September sky. Small ceremony, just family and a few of my army buddies who could get leave. Sergeant Miller was my best man, still limping from an injury in Baghdad. Jessica wore her grandmother's dress, a simple lace design that had been passed down through 3 generations, and she cried when I promised to love her, no matter what came our way. I meant every word, not knowing that promises are easier to make than to keep when you carry ghosts from wars nobody wants to remember. The transition was harder than I expected. Civilian life felt slow, quiet, too boring after years of living on a razor's edge. I'd flinch at sudden noises. New Year's fireworks made me look for cover. The sound of helicopters transported me back to hot landing zones in Afghanistan. I had trouble sleeping without my pistol under the pillow. Jessica would wake up in the middle of the night to find me checking the door locks for the 5th time, making sure the windows were secure, setting up defensive perimeters in a suburban house that didn't need them. She never complained, just held me until the tension left my shoulders, whispering that it was okay, that I was home, that the war was over. But the war is never really over for those who've lived it. It just changes shape, hides in the shadows of the mind, waiting for the right moment to strike again. I found work with Carter Construction, building luxury homes for rich families in the south side of town. Those gated communities with English names and security guards who'd never seen a real gun in their lives. The physical labor helped. Hauling bags of cement, raising beams, installing windows, using my hands to create instead of destroy. Every house I helped build was a small redemption, proof that I could add something to the world instead of just taking from it. My boss, Frank Carter, was an ex-Marine who understood what guys like me needed. Structure, purpose, respect for what we'd been through. He never asked about my missions, but sometimes over lunch we'd share a look that said more than words ever could. But in the last year, something had changed. Jessica started working out at a new gym, Elite Fitness, one of those trendy places with equipment that cost more than cars and trainers who looked like magazine models. She came home later, always with excuses about traffic or grabbing a smoothie with her gym friends. She spent more time looking at her phone and less at me. The late-night texts she claimed were from work. The different perfume she swore was a free sample from the drugstore. The silent dinners where the only sound was the clinking of silverware on plates. She said she needed space to find herself, that I was too intense, too serious, too stuck in the past. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was still stuck in desert sands thousands of miles away. But that didn't justify what she did. It didn't justify the lies, the betrayal, the nights she spent in another man's bed while I stayed up. worried something had happened to her. I should have seen the signs. The way she'd flinch when I touched her, as if my skin burned hers. The way she avoided eye contact at dinner, focusing on her plate, as if the answers to all the world's problems were hidden among the grains of rice. The way she started picking fights over small things, like how I'd loaded the dishwasher wrong, leaving the knives pointing up, or forgotten to buy the right kind of milk, the non-fat, lactose-free kind that cost 3 times as much as the regular stuff. 3 months ago, on a rainy Thursday in June, she told me she was going to stay at her sister's for a while. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out what she wanted from life. Her bag was already packed, waiting by the door like a death sentence. I didn't fight, I didn't beg. I just watched her leave and disappear into the rain, her car's taillights vanishing around the corner like the last moments of a sunset. I found out about Brad 2 weeks later when my neighbor's kid, 17-year-old Pete, who spent more time on Instagram than in the real world, posted a picture. Jessica and some muscular guy at a fancy restaurant downtown, the Venetian Terrace, holding hands across the table, looking at each other like lovesick teenagers. The caption read, "Busted. The hot nurse from the neighborhood with the UFC fighter." He wasn't in the UFC, I found out later, but the lie served its purpose. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a cold, calculated calm. The same mental state I entered before a high-risk mission. The world became sharper, colors more vivid, sounds more distinct. I could hear my own heart beating, steady as a metronome, 60 beats per minute, no more, no less. I did what any sensible man would do. I drove to Elite Fitness where he trained, parked across the street in a position that gave me a clear view of the entrance without being noticed. I watched him spar with other athletes through the plate glass windows, his movements predictable, telegraphed. He favored his right, dropped his guard after a jab, had a bad habit of tucking his chin when he moved forward. I heard him bragging about his record in the locker room, his voice echoing into the parking lot, saying he was 1 fight away from signing with Bellator, that Dana White had replied to his Instagram DM. Obvious lies to anyone who knew the sport. For 3 days, I studied his patterns. He trained from 6 to 8 in the morning, drank the same protein shake at the same place, the power smoothie at the mall. He ate lunch at the same buffet restaurant, always getting grilled chicken and sweet potatoes, the cliché diet of someone who thinks muscle is a personality. He'd go back to train in the afternoon, from 3 to 5. On Fridays, he went to Murphy's pub with his friends, always ordering the same expensive craft beer he clearly had no palate to appreciate. On Saturdays, he'd take Jessica to dinner, always at expensive places where he could be seen, where he could show off his conquest like a trophy. He was as predictable as a clock, and predictable men are defeated men. They just don't know it yet. The confrontation at Murphy's pub was not an accident. Jessica texted me, asking to meet on a Wednesday at 8 o'clock sharp. Said she wanted to talk about the divorce papers, about dividing our assets, about how we could move forward civilly. But when I arrived 15 minutes early as always, scoping out the terrain, Brad was already there waiting. He was positioned strategically near the back exit, blocking my most obvious escape route, as if they'd been studying military manuals on YouTube. They had rehearsed this. I could see it in the little details. The way Jessica checked her watch when I walked in, confirming I was on time. The way the bartender, whom I'd never seen before, already had his phone positioned on the bar, ready to record. The way 2 of Brad's friends were at a nearby table, pretending to play pool but watching every move. It was an amateur ambush, the kind that would work on an ordinary civilian. But I was no ordinary civilian. I had survived real ambushes, where the price of a mistake wasn't humiliation, it was death. I walked straight toward them, without hesitation, without showing surprise. I kept my hands visible but relaxed, my body language open but ready. Brad straightened up as I approached, puffing out his chest like a peacock, the muscles in his neck taut like guitar strings about to snap. "Hi, Jessica," I said, ignoring him completely. "You wanted to talk about the papers." She seemed thrown off. This wasn't the script. I was supposed to react to Brad, to show anger, jealousy, desperation. Instead, I was as calm as a lake on a windless morning. "Cole," she began, but Brad cut her off, taking a step forward, invading my personal space. The smell of his hair gel was cloying, something with an English name that promised extreme hold. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice low, threatening, practiced in front of a mirror. I finally looked at him, really looked at him, the way a sniper assesses a target, calculating distance, wind, obstacles. "Why, this is a public place. I came to meet my wife to discuss legal matters." "Your ex-wife," he corrected, a crooked smile appearing. "She's with me now." "Still legally my wife," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, professional, "until we sign the papers, which is what I came to do. Unless you have some objection." That's when he went for the physical threat, moving even closer, using his size to try to intimidate me. "Either you walk away now or I put you in a coma." The silence that followed was thick as morning fog. I could hear the bar's background music, some generic pop song nobody was really listening to. I could hear the hum of the ice machine behind the counter. I could hear Brad's accelerated breathing, shallow, anxious. The breathing of someone who's never had to control their adrenaline when lives are on the line. I didn't move. I didn't back down. I just kept looking at him, letting the silence do the work. Every second that passed without me reacting increased his uncertainty. He expected fear, anger, some emotion he could exploit. Instead, he found a void. The same void I used when I was under interrogation in a POW camp in Pakistan, when showing emotion meant showing weakness, and weakness meant death. That's when I started rolling up my sleeves, revealing the scars, each with its own story of horror and survival. His expression changed, the bravado melting like ice under a desert sun. He saw the truth written on my skin. I wasn't someone who fought for sport. I was someone who had killed to survive, and survived when killing wasn't enough. In the days that followed, I executed my plan with military precision. First, information warfare. I discovered that Breno Vargas wasn't even his real name. Bradley Vargas, son of a schoolteacher and a used car salesman, had never served a day in the armed forces, despite telling stories about his time in Afghanistan in every bar he frequented. Daniel Matos, my brother-in-arms who now worked in corporate intelligence, helped me put together a complete dossier. Brad had been kicked out of 2 previous gyms for not paying his dues. His fight record was padded with wins against opponents paid to take a dive. The drug test he failed was covered up with a $2,000 bribe to the event organizer. The threats he made to ex-girlfriends, documented in 3 police reports that never became charges because the women were either scared or paid off. But the best part, the icing on this cake of lies, were the videos. Brad had a narcissistic habit of filming everything, posting everything, living his life like a reality show where he was the only viewer, including a video from 3 months ago, 2 weeks before Jessica needed space, where he was telling his friends he was going to steal that little toy soldier's wife because women like a real man, not some robot programmed to kill. I saved everything. Every screenshot, every video, every document. I organized it like I organized mission reports, chronologically, with cross-references and source verification. Then I began phase 2, psychological pressure. I showed up at Elite Fitness during his training sessions, always visible but never confrontational. Just lifting weights, running on the treadmill, present like a shadow he couldn't shake. I watched his performance drop, his concentration shatter. He'd miss simple strikes, lose his balance during basic drills. Fear, I learned long ago, is the most effective poison. It doesn't kill quickly, but it kills for sure. I made calls to acquaintances in the fighting world. I didn't threaten, I didn't slander. I just asked questions. You guys know that Brad Vargas claims to be a military veteran. Have you verified his record? Have you seen his drug tests? The questions spread like a virus, infecting every conversation about him, planting doubts that would grow like weeds. I found the owner of the red Mustang at a dealership. I learned he was 4 payments behind. Her casual conversation with the bank manager about delinquency and luxury vehicles was enough to accelerate the repossession process. Watching Brad have to hand over the keys was almost poetic. But the final blow came from where he least expected it. His mother, Mrs. Vargas, a devout church-going woman who attended the Assembly of God every Sunday, didn't know about her son's lies about military service. When Frank's brother-in-law, a journalist named Mark Fisher, called her for comment on a story he was preparing about stolen valor, she was devastated. A mother's shame is a weapon more devastating than any bomb. The Saturday meeting at Murphy's pub was the final act of this play. When I revealed everything I knew, When I showed the proof of his fabricated past, Brad tried to attack me. It was pathetic. A telegraphed punch that I dodged with minimal movement, followed by a grappling attempt that I neutralized with a simple wrist lock I learned in my first month of training. He fell to his knees, not from physical pain, but from the weight of his world crumbling. Jessica watched it all in silence. I saw in her eyes the exact moment she realized who she had chosen over me. A liar, a coward, a man who built his entire identity on fantasy and steroids. The tears that streamed down her face weren't of sadness. They were of humiliation, of anger at herself, of belated regret. "You destroyed him," she said later, after Brad had run out of the bar, leaving her behind like the coward he always was. "No," I replied, getting up to leave. "He destroyed himself. I just accelerated the process." But Cole, she started, reaching out to touch my arm. I pulled away. Her touch meant nothing to me anymore. "The divorce papers are in your email. Sign them and send them back. Keep the house, the furniture, everything. I don't want anything that reminds me of this mistake." I walked out of the bar and never looked back. But the story didn't end there. 3 days after the article was published, I got a call. Colonel Thompson, my old commanding officer, now working at the Department of Defense. "Captain Bishop," he said, using my old rank, "heard about your little problem with an imposter. It wasn't a problem, sir. It was a cleanup operation." He laughed, that rough laugh of someone who smoked too much in Afghan trenches. "Always efficient. Listen, we're putting together a task force to combat stolen valor. We need someone with your experience and, let's say, creativity." Interested? I thought for a moment. My civilian life was stable. The partnership with Frank at the construction company was going well. So I had found a peace I thought I'd never have. But there were other Brads out there, tarnishing the honor of men and women who gave everything for their country. "When do I start?" "Monday. Welcome back to the service, Captain." 6 months passed. The task force had already exposed 17 fake veterans, from firearms instructors who'd never held a military weapon to motivational speakers selling fabricated war stories. Each case was a small victory, a necessary cleansing of military honor. Brad Vargas disappeared. Last I heard, he was trying to be a fighter in Thailand where nobody knew his history. But the internet has a long memory, and the groups of American veterans abroad had already been alerted. He changed countries, but he couldn't change who he was, a coward pretending to be a warrior. Jessica tried to reach out a few times, messages asking for forgiveness, saying she'd been manipulated, that Brad had seduced her with lies. I deleted them all without reading to the end. Forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal, and reconciliation doesn't heal wounds that were opened on purpose. She made her choice that night in the parking lot, when she stood by his side waiting to see me humiliated. Now she had to live with the consequences. I found peace in unexpected places. In Sunday mornings fishing on the Hickory River, where the only sound was the running water and birdsong. In afternoons teaching self-defense to women at the community center, passing on skills that could save lives. In evenings playing chess with Frank, 2 strategic minds facing off in silent battles where nobody died. The house I built with my own hands, a small home on a few acres outside of town, became my sanctuary. Every nailed board, every placed shingle, every raised wall was an act of creation that balanced the years of destruction. The garden I planted with tomatoes, lettuce, and herbs connected me to the earth in a way the desert never allowed. I met Sarah in one of the self-defense classes. A history teacher, divorced, mother of a 10-year-old boy named Lucas. She wasn't impressed by my scars or my war stories. She was more interested in who I was now, not who I had been. Our first date was in a bookstore, arguing about the Civil War between dusty shelves. She made me laugh for real for the first time in years when she said my tactical analysis of the Battle of Gettysburg was romantically nerdy. Lucas accepted me slowly, testing boundaries like any kid with a new adult in his life. But when he found out I knew how to set up a camp, make a fire without matches, and navigate by the stars, he adopted me as a mentor. Weekends became camping adventures, where I taught basic survival, while Sarah taught the names of the constellations and their mythologies. A year after the confrontation at Murphy's pub, I received a letter. Brown envelope, no return address, hand-delivered to the construction company. Inside, a single sheet with irregular male handwriting. "Captain Bishop, you were right. I was a fraud. I spent my life pretending to be something I wasn't, trying to earn respect through fear instead of deserving it. You destroyed me, yes, but you also freed me. I had to face who I really was, a coward with muscles. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I felt the need to lie, to intimidate, to pretend. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that your lesson was learned. I'll never again pass myself off as something I'm not. I'll never again dishonor the sacrifice of real warriors. Bradley Vargas, P.S. Jessica wasn't to blame. I was the one who seduced her with lies, manipulated her, used her insecurities against her. She loved you. Still does. I burned the letter that night, watching the words turn to ash in the backyard fire pit. The past couldn't be rewritten, only overcome. Bradley had chosen his path, Jessica hers, and I mine. There were no heroes or villains in this story, just people making choices and living with the consequences. Sarah came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist, the warmth of her body a contrast to the cool night air. Thinking about the past, she asked. Burying it, I replied, tossing the last of the ashes into the fire. She squeezed me tighter. Good. The present is much better. And it was. Lucas was asleep in the hammock on the porch, exhausted after a day helping build a treehouse. Dinner was waiting on the table, simple but made with love. The life I had now wasn't the one I'd planned, but it was real, honest, built on truths instead of lies. The phone rang. Colonel Thompson again. Captain, we have a situation in Chicago, a group selling tactical training using fake credentials. Can you take a look? Send me the details. I'll check it out tomorrow. Sarah looked at me with that half smile that meant she understood. Always saving the world one liar at a time. Someone's got to do it, I said. And apparently I'm good at it. You're good at a lot of things, she answered. But let's leave the work for tomorrow. Tonight you're just coal, my coal. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. More than enough. It was all I needed to be. 2 years have passed since that night at Murphy's pub. The construction company grew. We hired 15 employees, all veterans needing a second chance. We built houses, but we also rebuilt lives, giving purpose to men who came back from war, not knowing how to live in peace. Frank and I started a mentorship program, teaching construction skills while offering psychological support. We called it Project Rebuild, and it had already helped 43 vets find their way back. The Task Force Against Stolen Valor became a national operation. We created a database, a verification system, gave lectures in schools about the true meaning of military service. It wasn't about glory or violence. It was about sacrifice, discipline, honor, values you couldn't fake with muscles and tattoos. Sarah and I got married in a simple ceremony at our place. Lucas carried the rings, proud in his first suit. My old army buddies came, men and women who understood the weight of what we carried. Frank was my best man, giving a speech that made us laugh and cry. He talked about second chances, about how sometimes we need to be broken down to be rebuilt stronger. Jessica showed up at my office one day, 3 years after it all. She looked different, thinner, her eyes tired, but there was a new strength in them. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, she said. I came to say thank you. I waited, saying nothing. You showed me who I really was. Someone shallow who chose muscles over character, lies over truth. It hurt, Cole, it hurt a lot. But it needed to hurt for me to change. And did you? She smiled, a sad but genuine smile. I'm trying. Therapy twice a week. Volunteer work at the hospital. Trying to be someone worthwhile, not just someone who looks the part. I nodded. I'm happy for you, Jessica. I really am. She got up to leave, paused at the door. Are you happy? I glanced at the picture on my desk. Sarah, Lucas, and me on top of a mountain we'd climbed together. Smiles genuine, sweaty, but triumphant. I'm at peace, and that's better than happy. She nodded and left. We never spoke again. But I heard through mutual acquaintances that she rebuilt her life, married a doctor from the hospital, someone kind and true, had 2 kids, found her own peace. Brad or Bradley never came back to the States. Last I heard, he was working as a personal trainer in Miami, using his real name, not pretending to be anything more than what he was. Maybe we all needed that destruction to find who we really were under the masks we wore. Sitting on the porch of our home, watching Lucas practice the self-defense moves I taught him. Sarah correcting his posture with infinite patience. I thought about that night in the parking lot of Murphy's pub. the moment Brad tried to intimidate me, not knowing he was initiating his own destruction. Some people think strength is about muscles, about intimidation, about making others feel small. But real strength, the kind that matters, is about control, patience, knowing when to fight and when to let your opponent destroy himself. It's about building instead of destroying, about protecting instead of attacking. It's about knowing that sometimes the greatest victory is simply walking away and letting karma do its job. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red, colors that reminded me of other sunsets in faraway places when survival was uncertain and tomorrow was a promise that might not be kept. But I had survived. More than that, I had found a life worth living. Sarah joined me on the porch, bringing 2 cold beers, the local craft kind we'd discovered at a street fair. Lucas kept practicing, determined to get the move just right. "What are you thinking about, soldier?" she asked, using the affectionate nickname only she was allowed to use. "That some wars are worth losing?" I replied, "Because defeat is sometimes the path to real victory." She clinked her bottle against mine. "To the future, then. May it be more peaceful than the past." "To the future," I agreed. "And may the ghosts of the past finally rest in peace." And as the sun disappeared below the horizon, taking another day with it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't happiness exactly, not peace completely. It was something deeper, truer. It was the feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, with the right people by my side. It was the feeling of finally being home, not to a place but to a life that made sense. A life built on truth instead of lies, on love instead of possession, on real strength instead of empty intimidation. And that, I discovered, was worth more than all the victories on all the battlefields in the world.